Hi everyone, Tanya here. Welcome back to my little book corner. We are finally having the camera facing the correct way so things will not be backwards. But welcome to my channel. Welcome to this video. If you are new, my name is Tanya. I like to make videos mostly about books, but also about simple and frugal living. And I hope you stick around. And in today's video, I'm doing my March and April wrap up just because in March I felt like I didn't read as much. It was just kind of a month. I felt like a lot of other booktubers I also saw were just in a book slump, and that was the same for me. I just felt like, I don't know, there's just a lot going on in life, and I don't know, for some reason I just couldn't really get into a book. So I'm combining March and April and you guys the books that I've read the past couple months. So honestly, the majority of my books, I only have one in print, and then the rest have been on my Kindle. I've been doing a lot of Kindle reading because I recently got Kindle Unlimited, and that's been really fun, and so I've been doing a lot of Kindle reading from there. But as always, I'll put the pictures up so you can see what they look like, the covers of the books if you are interested. And as always, also, please leave your comments down below. What have you been reading? I always like to hear from people. Let's get into today's video. We are going to start off with a 5-star read and one of my favorite books. I heard a lot about this book and I decided to give it a try because it is by authors that I really enjoyed from a different book. It is Love and Other Words. I love this book. I wasn't sure I wanted to try this author because they're the same authors who wrote The Unhoneymooners, and I'm just realizing that I think that these authors are really great. I really love them, and so I believe they're two authors, and this is my second book by them. Like I said, I read Unhoneymooners and I decided to give it a try. I loved it. It was so good. It is a 5 out of 5-star reads for me. I recommend this one if you have not read it. Please read it, especially, I mean, if you love romance, but I think it's so much more than, it's written so well. Like, there's romances that are great and fun and just like happy or whatever, and they're cute romances, but there's also like this one is just like, it's just deep, and I feel it, and I actually teared up a little bit, and it is normally hard for me to cry, but I really did tear up in this one. I just loved it a lot. So it's about Macy and Elliot, and I love Elliot so much. If you've read this book, like, right? He's so great. The book is, kind of the plot of the book is that it follows Macy and Elliot, and it goes between the past and the future, or not the past, like the past and the present, and it kind of follows their story in their life, and that they, from when they were younger, they really got to be best friends and maybe even develop into more, and then you find out that now they've been separated for years and like what exactly happened. But it is just, she's actually set to marry someone else. Like, now it's been years, she's, you know, engaged to someone else, and then she runs into Elliot now, like how many years later, and so now they're kind of back, like reunited, and kind of seeing like what's happening and just the connection. But I love the perspective of going back in the past, and it kind of reminded me almost of people we meet on vacation, but it's done really well, and just how it's written, and just the whole idea of things, like it involves them, like they love books, and just the idea of words, and if you're a fellow book, you know, like anything, a book about books and like literature, there's just something about it, and it's just done so well. And like I said, Elliot, I love Elliot's character in this book. It's just so good. I really recommend it. I flew through this and I just loved it. 5 out of 5 stars, so definitely a good one. Next one I read was called The Fine Print, and I heard a lot about this one because I believe it's a series. This one again was on Kindle Unlimited, so if you do want to check it out, it's there. And then this book is about Rowan and Zara, or Zahra, I'm not sure, but it follows basically, it's a story of Rowan, and him and his family, they own the equivalent of pretty much like Disneyland or Disney World, but it's Wonderland, I think is what it's called. And so part of, like, they can earn parts of it, but part of the agreement is that he has to, after his grandfather and he passed away, is that he has to do, you know, like each of the grandsons has to do a certain task or whatever, which I think is where the series comes from. But it follows their love story. It's kind of like an enemies to lovers, and I thought it was good. Again, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It does have steam in it, so again, if you don't want to read any of that, this is not the book. It does have some. I did enjoy the story. I thought the characters were definitely like more developed, and I don't know, it just wasn't I gave it 3 out of 5 because I don't know, it wasn't, I think maybe because also I read it right after I read this book. I just felt like it wasn't like, oh, like, it's not a 5 out of 5 for me personally. I know a lot of people love it. I do have to say, it is like a pretty good romance compared to some others that I've read. So I gave it a 3 out of 5, which again, for me, 3 out of 5 is not bad. That's like, you know, average or pretty good. So I still would recommend it. It's just, I don't know if I'll be reading the rest of the series. Maybe if I'm kind of like, maybe, but I'm not like, oh my gosh, I want to read the rest of it right now. Works for this company at Wonderland, and she ends up, basically he ends up kind of hiring her for this new position, and they work together and just like close proximity, and then he's kind of like a grumpster, you know, and like just seeing how they work together, but they obviously fall for each other and what will happen with that, you know. But again, it was good. 3 out of 5 for me. The next book I read, I decided to read another Colleen Hoover book because you guys know I've been trying to read through her books, and it is called Heartbones, and this one I believe is also on Kindle Unlimited. And so it follows the story of Bea, I think is that how you say her name. For one, okay, first of all, side note about Colleen Hoover, I feel like she just comes up with the most random, like, weird names, at least to me. Like, I'm just like, what are these names? Like, so she has Bea, I think it's Bea, and then Samson. And so it follows the story of Bea, and she kind of has a hard life, and just with her mom ends up passing to the very beginning, and she is still a minor. I believe she's 17, so she ends up going to her dad in Texas, and she doesn't really have a relationship with her dad, but she goes to Texas to live there before she goes to college, and she runs into Samson like on a peninsula in Texas, so it's kind of like beachish situation. And so this Samson like lives in the houses there. So it just follows the story because they're both kind of similar. It's weird because they're both kind of closed off, and they've experienced trauma in their lives, and so they're just kind of drawn together. And so it follows like their connection and their relationship, and it seems like at first, like, it's weird because it's like they have things in common but they don't. Like, he seems to be from like a rich family, and he's from wealth and things like that, and she's from poverty and not. And but they're kind of, I guess, they're both drawn to like sad things or sadness, because you kind of start finding out they've been through difficult things, and so that draws them together. And so the story follows that. But then, as always, you know, with Colleen Hoover, things are not always what they seem. I feel like she's always like plot twists in her story, so there is a little bit of a plot twist, which I actually thought it was done really well. It was pretty good. I believe I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars because, again, I feel like her books, the way Colleen writes, I always get, you know, sucked into the story. I think I read it in 2 days, and it was really interesting, and I thought it was done really well, and I enjoyed the ending and how, again, I don't want to give too much away. It was kind of a vague synopsis because you just have to read it, but I would recommend it. I think it's one of her books that I like a lot better than some of her other ones. The next book I read was The Dating Plan, and this is just a cute romance. Also, it follows the story of Daisy, I believe. Daisy and Liam, yes, and I think this was number 2. It's called the Marriage Game series. I just saw this at my library and it looked interesting, but again, I think you could read it out of order because I didn't read the first one and it was fine. Like, it all made sense to me. So you could, you know, it doesn't have to be read in order. But it follows a story of Daisy, and she's a software engineer, I believe, and so she kind of is more quiet and planned out, and she works for this company that they make like feminine care products, and so she works for this brand. It's kind of a startup, and unfortunately the startup is just not really like taking off. It's not going, like, it's a really awesome company, but it's just not going super well. And also, so she's from, like, her family is Indian, and so they really are set on her, like, you know, trying to find someone and marry someone, and she's just not in that place. Like, she's like, I don't want to marry someone right now, or like some random guy that you want me to like set me up with. So then basically she ends up running into, like, years later, like, her brother's best friend growing up is Liam, and he's, you know, kind of the opposite of hers, flies by the seat of his pants, and he's a venture capitalist, so he works with companies and, you know, like investing money, all that kind of stuff. But he is, like I said, the opposite of her. And so then she basically asks him kind of like, can you pretend to be my fiance just to kind of get off my back because my family's trying to set me up with this other random guy that I don't want to. So he agrees, and of course you guys know, so they kind of come up with this plan because it's called the dating plan, and she's a big planner. So she comes up with this plan of these dates that they're gonna go on, and of course, you know, you kind of see where this is going, like close proximity, fake dating. But I thought it was done pretty well. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I liked both of the characters, and just the romance was done really well. And I might be checking out, I don't know if another book in the series is already out, but I think I definitely want to check out the first one for sure, because like I said, I didn't read that one yet. Then the next book was another Colleen Hoover, which I didn't really know what it was about. I just kind of go into Colleen Hoover's books and like see what happens. But it was the book Hopeless, and I actually really also enjoyed this one. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, and I really did like it. It follows the story of Sky, and she is someone who is adopted and she's homeschooled, and she ends up meeting this guy Dean, who lives in their town, and he goes to the high school in their town, and she has started attending the high school. She just wanted to see, you know, kind of what the experience it was like, because she had been homeschooled prior to that. So they cross paths, and essentially there's kind of always a twist, as you know, with Colleen Hoover. And so then there's actually kind of a secret that he is hiding, and something that he's dealing with. It's a big part of his past, and it's actually intertwined with hers, like her past and her present. And when it kind of comes out, the secret, it definitely alters her life in a big way and just opens up this whole thing. And so obviously I don't want to give it away, but that's kind of the gist of the story. And there is some, you know, like intense things discussed, especially like with past like abuse and regarding with children as well. So that is difficult to read, but I think Colleen Hoover did a really great job. I feel like she does a great job of tackling difficult things for her stories. She writes it very well. I did really enjoy the book. I know there's a second one, and I'm excited to see. I believe it's telling it from Dean's from the guy's perspective, so I'm excited to see what it's like and what it'll, you know, how it'll be different. So, but I do recommend it. It's a 5 out of 5 read for me. The next book that I read in April, was it March or April? I can't even remember now, one of the months, but I was really excited for this book because it is by the same author who did one of my favorite duology series of last year, by Trisha Levenseller, and she did the Daughter of the Pirate King duology, and I love this series. And so the series, I was really excited. It's called the book is called The Shadows Between Us, and I was excited to read it. And to be honest, so Laura, if you're watching, this review is for you. A friend of mine, we found out we both read this book. I originally gave it 4 stars, and she gave it 1 star, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. So we had a whole discussion over this while we were both rooming together in Seattle for a work trip. So this is like the things we discussed late at night, and I was like, okay, tell me why you gave it 1 star. And her arguments were very convincing, and we realized like there were things we both hated about the story or really disliked, and so eventually I did bring it down to 3 stars. So I don't know, I kind of, for me, ranges between 2 and 3 stars, because honestly the biggest thing for me that is disappointment of this story is, so it's about this character named Alessandra. She's the main character, and her goal, kind of the whole point of the beginning of this book and what it is that she wants to basically woo the Shadow King, get him to marry her, then she kills him, and then she's gonna get like his kingdom and his power and everything. So then she's like, haha, now the power's all mine. So that's ultimately like the goal of what she's going for. The thing that was really hard for me, and we kind of were discussing this, is that it's just the main character, like Alessandra, the girl, she's just like not a very believable character, which is very different for me from the other books by the author, because I really love the main character, and so I was really excited. And it's just, to me, there's something about her that's just not very believable. Like, she talks about the character, and she's 18 years old, so she's a young adult, and just like how she describes herself, she's also just kind of like a mean character, and like really like rude. And she's like, I know I'm attractive and I'm seductive, and I'm just gonna, like, I don't know, just like how her character is, I really don't like her. And as a main character, it just really bothered me. And then she's like, also in my free time I sew sexy nightgowns, and I was like, wait, what? Like, it just seemed so kind of random and didn't really make sense. And then she was this like, yeah, when I was 15, like, I killed someone because he said he didn't like me anymore. And I was just like, that's like kind of mentally unstable. Like, I don't know, it's just like really, she's a strange character, and I just really, like, I don't mind if there's kind of like a dark or sinister character, but just like the way it was written, it was like childish but also really unstable but also weird while trying to be an adult. Like, I don't know, it just didn't, I mean, personally, I did not like the character. And it ends up being kind of like an enemies or like undercover, and I don't even know what kind of romance you would call it, but kind of like an enemies, because, you know, and then of course they change their minds and they end up liking each other, and just yeah, and there's a fantasy element because he's a shadow king and there's literal shadows around him and stuff, and that whole magical element. So it was okay, but it's like a 2 or 3 stars for me. So I don't know, those are my thoughts. So Laura, that review is for you. And that's the book that we did not like, and her goofy weird nightgowns and stuff that she sews. Anyway, it was not my favorite. It's okay. It's a good fast read. The romance is alright, but even the romance is not really my favorite. I feel like it was very rushed, and I didn't like that. Next book that I read was, I know this has been really popular, and I do have to say I really like this one as well. It is Things We Never Got Over. I also just appreciate the cover. I think it's pretty, and I appreciate that it's a romance book that's just like not people on it or like weird, you know, like weird covers. Like, I just think it's a cute cover. But besides the points, it has to do with Knox and Naomi, I believe is her name. And so Naomi comes to this town, and she looks like kind of, maybe she's like a runaway bride or something, because she shows up to this town in like her wedding dress, and obviously she's not at a wedding anymore. And essentially people are giving her dirty looks. They don't like her because she looks like, so she has a twin sister. And the twin sister is the complete opposite of her. She's just like causes problems in the town. No one likes her. Everyone has an issue with her, including Knox. And so he just kind of confronts her from like, starts kind of yelling at her, and she's like, whoa, I'm not who you think you are. This is me. And basically the story follows, he kind of ends up helping her. She's in this town trying to meet her sister. There's like problems that happen, and part of the issue is that she finds out she has this niece that she never knew, that I think is like 11 or so, and so she ends up basically becoming like a single parent like overnight pretty much, because she has to have her niece with her. And I just love the story too, because I really liked the romance. It was cute, and it was just sweet. I really liked it, the development, but I also really liked the side characters. Like, I felt like I really got to know the different perspectives of each of the main, like Knox and Naomi, the characters, but I also really love the side characters, like all the family members and the friends and people. And I really hope there will be a second book, because there's a romance in there that follows one of Knox's friends and one of the, I think it's the librarian from the town, and you can tell like, ooh, what's happening there. Like, that would be a really good book. So if there is, like, I would really love for that to be a book. Like, I would read that. But I just really liked how it was done. It was funny too in parts, and it's just overall, it's like over 500 pages, I want to say, but I really liked it. For me, I think it's like a 4 or 5 star, like maybe 4.5. I think it's not like a 5 out of 5 like Love in Other Words was. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, I just loved it. So maybe like a 4 out of 5 for me. I think I rated it a 4 out of 5, but I really enjoy it, recommend it. It's on Kindle Unlimited. Then the next book that I read was also a romance book. I think I'm just becoming a romance reader is what I'm shifting to. I just love it, and it makes me happy. But I read From Look Up with, is that what it's called? It's called From Look Up with Love. It is my very first Miranda Zapata book. I know she's known for slow burn. That's all I really know, and that her books are very long. This book was also very long. I think it was like 700 or 800 pages. I ended up giving it, I think, a 4 out of 5. I read it, I enjoyed it, and it follows the story of, I can never say it in English, is it Ivan? Because in Russian it's Ivan, because the character is Russian also, but I think it's Ivan in English. There we go, I was getting confused. So Ivan, or Ivan in Russian, but he is like a professional figure skater. He's won tons of medals, like he's won worlds and all these, you know, skating championships, but he doesn't have a partner. And then there's Jasmine, who he technically has known her for like most of their life. She is his sister's best friend, and they just grew up and they just really didn't get along. They really kind of hated each other, especially like in the skating world, because they all train at the same place. But he doesn't have a partner, and Jasmine has never really played. She doesn't have a partner either. There's things that happened in the past, and she kind of is almost like close to like her some people in her family are kind of pushing her to kind of give it up, but skating is her dream. And long story short, Ivan asks her to be his partner and to train and to hopefully, you know, most likely win like worlds and possibly even make it to the Olympics one day. Like there's just a lot of promise there. And so even though she like really hates him and they hate each other, she's like, I can't pass it up. So then they end up becoming partners. And so it's definitely like a slow progression, like slow burn, because it's 800 pages and they don't really like, you know, proclaim their feelings or do anything like until way towards like the end of the book. And here's the thing, I think it was done well. I didn't hate the story. I read it pretty quickly, but a few things I felt like it definitely still could be shorter. Just because 800 pages did seem like a lot to me. I didn't hate the 800 pages, but I also wasn't like, oh my gosh, I just love it, and just like it was so necessary. Like it could have been shorter, and I think it still could have been good. The other thing that's also personally for me, maybe some people don't mind, but I was reading it on my Kindle, and I guess no matter where you read it, Kindle, you know, like my Kindle tells me how much time, and it's about 30. There's like 30-minute chapters or 45 minutes or so. Like there's such long chapters, and it's so difficult for me because sometimes I like to just kind of read a chapter at a time. It's difficult to, like for me personally, because I don't always have like a 45-minute chunk to sit and read a whole chapter. So that was sometimes for me, I felt like I was like, oh my gosh, like I really gotta like fuck it, you know, like I just didn't like that they were so long. I wish that the chapters were a little bit shorter. Overall, like I said, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I liked it. I thought it was good character. I mean, obviously in 800 pages, like you definitely get some character development and you really learn the backstory of the characters. Although I felt like we didn't know that much about Ivan, like in a way you do, but you don't know much about his past, and I wish I could have learned more about that. But it was okay. I'm not like I said, I'm not like, oh my gosh, I love it, I'm just obsessed. So I might maybe read another Marina Zapata book maybe in the future, but I'm not like rushing to get to it. If you have read, let me know, like, you know, any of her books. I think she also writes a lot of like sports romances, and those are not really my favorite, so I don't know. Let me know down below if there's one that you prefer from her. But those are my thoughts on that. And the last book that I read, which I think is kind of like my weirdest, not weird, I don't even know how to describe it. So it's a romance book. I saw a recommendation for it on BookTube from someone, and it is called Darling Venom, which is just kind of a weird name also. And it's such a weird book to explain, but it deals basically with these two, Charlie is her name, and then is it Declan, Dylan? I can never remember people's names. You guys know this. Oh, it's so difficult for me. Kellen, Charlie and Kellen, and it starts when they're in high school, and they, without knowing it, like they were almost like she was going to commit suicide and he was going to commit suicide, and they were on the same roof, which it's just so weird because also the probability, like I don't know, it's just kind of weird. Like there's a lot of things in this book that I understand why they were there, but also the story, like parts of it like didn't seem believable, or they were just kind of weird. So then they came and they're like, whoa, okay, let's not kill ourselves, let's have this pact where like we're gonna stay alive, because they were still in high school. And then long story short, there's a tragedy that happens and Kellen is gone, and during that time, there are a few times they met. Kellen talks about how he like hated his brother growing up. He's an older brother named Tate, and so years down the road, Charlie and things happen, she still, like Kellen, just like he's part of her, like a memory and just parts of her life. But she runs into, of course, Tate, and he is like this super hot, grumpy, mean, like OBGYN doctor, you know, like gynecologist doctor, and he's like a miracle with helping women conceive and all this stuff and have babies. So he's like amazing, but yet he's like supposedly like this super terrible human being or whatever. So then it's like a weird situation, because then it's kind of like she ends up, you know, they're intertwined, and like there's things that happen, and then basically like feelings and things are forming between them, like Tate and Charlie. And so it's just weird, because it's like Kellen is not there, but yet he is a big part of the story too. And I did enjoy like the literary part of, if you read the story, like with Kellen and who he was and finding out more about him, and as they like Tate and Charlie, like, even though there's attraction, but then also just dealing with the individual grief and things that they have in life, because both of them have experienced death with different family members and things like that. So that's also part of the story. But okay, I also have to say, if you have read this book, maybe I'm weird, but like some of the things, like especially the whole scene where she goes and she has to like go to the gynecologist, and like just the whole situation, like it just, I was like, so that's one of the chapters where like in a book, like I had a hard time like believing that, but also like just reading it, I don't know why, it just made me like cringe inside. I was like, I couldn't read it, and I just found the whole thing like not very believable. It's kind of weird, and just being like, I had to do this, and I was like, no, you did not have to do this weird gynecology exam if you didn't want to do it. Just like I felt like I could have been like, no, I don't want to, and then that was it. But like the argument for why she did it, like I get it, but I also don't. I'm like, it's not necessary. And just also I feel like I didn't get to know as much about Charlie as I wanted to, even though she's the main character. So I don't know, that just, it felt like it was an interesting plot, something I've never read before. It's definitely like deals with weird things. It's kind of a weird book. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either, and it was just kind of different. I think we just, even though I think it is like maybe it's 400 pages, but I feel like it just was not developed enough for me, or like believable enough for me, if that makes sense. Like if you've read it, maybe you know what I'm saying. But so I don't know, I can't say that I recommend it, or I don't know, but I gave it 3 out of 5 because it's like I read it, but it's not like I'm obsessed or like something to like really write home about. So I don't know, read it at your own risk. It has like steamy parts. It's just, I don't know, like it's okay. I will say that there. So I kind of started on a really high note in the beginning of my reading and ended kind of on a goofy note, but I will see you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye everyone. Happy reading.